Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album, the sophomore album from Years and Years, called Palo Santo. So I was really harsh the last time I reviewed Years and Years, way back in 2015. I think part of it was the expectation that I was going to like it more than I did. Electronic and synth-driven pop with prominent, forward-thinking, progressive sexual themes in the midst of a synth-pop wave that really crested that year in the indie scene. But between vocals that never really gripped me, production that was more concerned with washing everything out, and lyrics that definitely trod into some questionable territory without the smarter framing in order to back it up, the album just didn't really click. Oh sure, Gold is a fantastic song that I still revisit to this day, but beyond that, I didn't really have a lot of interest when this got added back to my schedule. Now that being said, I was intrigued by some of the buzz around Palo Santo, most notably that frontman Ollie Alexander was doubling down on the religious iconography for his writing and flipping it for more of a transgressive edge. Hell, the title of the album is a name for an incense used by the Inca culture to cast out evil spirits, and it's loosely translated to holy wood. Well, it's better than what Tove Lo did in 2016, but I will freely admit that I tend to be a bit of a sucker for religious subversion, so hopefully a few years away could lead to a more refined execution. So, what do we get on Palo Santo? Okay. This is one of those pop albums that I did not expect to like quite as much as I did. Definitely a measurable improvement from their debut in my books, and I can point to exactly where that happened very easily, and yet I would struggle to quite say it's a great album. Oh, it's getting there by cutting out a lot of the fat and streamlining things. Years and Years certainly delivered a very good project with few lulls, but I would struggle to really call it great. Solid for sure, but definitely a step away from true greatness, although they're definitely on the right path. And where I think we need to start here is the most notable improvement, Ollie Alexander himself, because in terms of projecting a more convincing, openly sexual presence, as he kinda has to in order to carry this album, especially lyrically, he really stepped up to the plate here. A big part of this ties into how much tighter and controlled his delivery is, but a larger factor comes in the judicious use of multi-tracking. He still doesn't have the most powerful voice, and by organically filling out more of the vocal track, he's a lot more effective there. Who could have told you that? Now, hell, the improvement was so stark, I actually went back to Communion to see if I had misheard him sometime around the first time, but no, he's just improved significantly, showing an ease and a comfort behind the microphone that's naturally increased his expressiveness in a really big way and rarely getting subsumed by the larger mix, and that's a big plus in his favor. Now granted, a big part of this does come through with the content, where I will introduce the caveat that this record didn't quite get as transgressive or challenging as I was hoping the lyrics. We're still a far cry from Perfume Genius here, but what has changed is Ollie Alexander's position within the narrative of these songs and how a lot of them are framed. What felt kind of weak-willed or unconvincing on his debut is amped up with a lot more strident presence, which is a natural fit for the sort of dance rhythms that he approaches a lot more effectively here. What I found kind of interesting in the framing is that while there is some religious iconography that's being utilized, the double entendres, they're remarkably straightforward or damn near literal across some of the sexual scenarios here. From hooking up with guys that are claiming their heterosexuality but really not so much on Sanctify, guys who are just using him for a physical relationship and not an emotional one on Rendezvous, to coaxing a partner away from disapproving religious figures within the family on Preacher. And what I kind of like about this album is that homosexuality in and of itself, it's not framed as perverse on songs like the title track. That track's pretty dark, but the darkness is coming from our protagonist being pulled back towards an ex in a drug-infused hookup where said ex is cheating on his new partner. Now, granted, there are some elements of cattiness that comes over from the first album that I wish didn't feel so obvious on songs like Lucky Escape, but even then, that track is smart enough to show how the social media projection of that ex with his new partner, it's really just obscuring old feelings they've got for Alexander, and he's gonna move on regardless, so when that ex comes back, it's too late. Hell, that impulse to actively move on is probably what elevates this album the most for me, a built-in sense of blunt maturity that didn't nearly come through strongly enough on Communion, but still is willing to seek out relationships that genuine yearning romance like on Hypnotized that turns out pretty damn charming. So okay, if the writing, if the performances, if they've both improved, what holds this project back from greatness? Well, it might be some of the production, where despite hiring a slightly richer cast of producers, including Greg Kurstin, who gives Hallelujah some much needed punches, one of the best cuts here thanks to that tighter bass groove and the wells of synth, the production still feels a shade too washed out and lacking some deeper melodic tone. Sanctify, prime early example, and that's a song I like. track. The vocal line and the production almost feels kind of reminiscent of early to mid-2000s Justin Timberlake with a more organic percussion, but the foundational tune feels kind of undercooked beyond the hazy vocal samples. Similar case with the reverb-drenched Hypnotized or the title track, even if I really do like the piano lines in both songs. And sometimes when you do get more of the synth leads, like the jagged buzzes on the hook of All For You, coming out of the more restrained and muffled keys on the verses, it feels a lot more like texture than actual tone. Or when you get the pluckier synth leads on the hook of Karma, or the oily tones are slightly sloppier multi-tracking on Rendezvous, they just feel kind of underweighed and a little bit thin in the mix overall. And then you get the chirpier tones on the songs like If You're Over Me, or the fluttery vocal samples on Lucky Escape. And look, I'm not saying that either are bad songs, they can really be alarmingly catchy, and I really dig the subtle bass groove beneath the latter, but does it really fit in with the heavier atmosphere that Years and Years has cultivated over the rest of this album, especially when you have songs like Preacher that's wedged right in between those two? But you know what, that's more of a factor how the record as a whole can feel kind of slight, for lack of better words. From lyrics that feel blunter than usual and not quite as subtle, to production that's making more of an obvious play for the mainstream accessibility and a lot of color. And when you consider the album comes in at a very tight 37 minutes and arguably feels even shorter, what more proof do you need that they're going in that direction? Now that being said, I like this a fair bit, even if I'm not sure the audience that preferred Years and Years' more atmospheric, experimental, electronic side will get on board in the same way. And indeed, if the production felt a little bit more cohesive and layered, I think this might click more effectively to match stronger performances and writing, might even have a play for the mainstream beyond just the UK. But as it is, it's a light 7 out of 10, and it's a recommendation, easily. If you're looking for a pretty solid, queer-friendly pop record from a group that's no longer afraid to mince words, you can do a lot worse than Years and Years. So, yeah, it's worth checking out. Definitely look it up. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine the Years and Years fan base won't be too pleased that I'm covering this, but hey, the poll's up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am. And if you want to buy the record, links down there in the description below. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If there's anything you guys want me to include on my schedule going forward, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even the top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. Looking forward to seeing any of that. You want to see my schedules down there in my Instagram, link below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.